Hello and welcome back. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today I do have another tabletop firearms review and comparison for you. We will be looking at the Century Arms C308 and the PTR Industries PTR-91. We will start off with a general unboxing of the two rifles so you see what they come with and new out of the box. Then I will do a brief history overview to see how they got from their original military counterparts to the two civilian models you see before you today. Then I will do a side-by-side comparison starting up at the barrel end, ending over at the butt end, so you can see if you're making a decision on each of these two platforms, what are the general differences and what are the different things you can expect when getting into the market from one of these platforms. If you've seen our videos before, you know the general idea, so let's jump into it now. We will go ahead and start with the unboxing of the Century Arms C308. I'll go ahead and open this up. It does come in a standard cardboard box. Right up here on the top we do have two 20-round, these are original G3 aluminum magazines, and we do have one 5-round steel magazine for hunting or bench rest shooting or anything you want to do with that. Here we do have a foam panel, which I will remove out of the way, and we do have the rifle underneath. Here you do have an instruction manual here, and that is essentially it. The PTR-91 does come in a hard plastic case. I'll go ahead and open these latches up and move this aside, revealing our rifle inside. Go ahead and check that we are clear, and we are. And then we do have one 20-round, again, a G3 surplus magazine. Moving these out of the way, underneath here we do have a gun safety lock, instruction manual, little identification tag, and that is it. Alright, now let's jump into a quick historical lesson and overview on these two rifles. You can see how they began as their military counterparts and then how they evolved into the two commercial variation rifles you see before you right now. The story begins with CETMI, which is Centro de Estudios Técnicos de Materiales Especiales, which is the Center of Technical Studies of Special Materials located in Spain. The CETMI Model 58 is a stamped steel select-fire battle rifle which accepts a 20-round detachable box magazine chambered in 7.62 by 51mm NATO. The rifle designed primarily by German engineer Ludwig Vorgrimler, who based his design on the STG-45M and the French AME-49. It uses a roller delay blowback similar to the roller locking system famously used in the MG42. Production began in Spain in 1957, and there were four main variations produced. A Model A, which was a prototype which fired in fully automatic from the open bolt and semi-automatic in the closed bolt. The Model B, which was the first production model, which was chambered in the 7.62 by 51mm CETMI, and the Model C, they did go ahead and move into the 7.62 by 51mm NATO, and they did lighten up various parts within the rifle. In 1958, it was accepted into the Spanish Army. In the 1990s, Century Arms began importing parts kits into the country and building them on US-made aluminum and stamped and welded receivers. These were built in the Model C configuration. They did not do very well on the consumer market as there were various complaints of reliability and the overall construction of the firearms, and they did not do very well as an import model or a production model by Century Arms. That all changed in 2015 when Century released the C308 variation, which is built on what Century claims to be the last existing CETMI parts out of Spain. These were built on US-made receivers, trigger group housings, and barrels made by PTR Industries, which is a company which is highly regarded for their attention to detail. Now let's move down into the PTR-91. The history of the PTR-91 starts with the German G3. As mentioned in 1958, the CETMI was accepted into service in the Spanish Army. H&K of Germany had worked on design changes with the CETMI, which produced the CETMI Model B. It was slated to go into further development for the German Army, but in 1956 the German Bundesgrundschütze canceled development in favor of the FNFAL. However, the newly formed West German Army, the Bundeswehr, wanted to resume testing on the CETMI, which they referred to as the Automatic Gewehr 3 or Automatic Rifle 3, or simply the G3, and went into testing against the SIG SG-510 and the American AR-10 to replace the then-used G1. In 1959, the West German Army officially adopted the G3. Changes were made during its service life, giving the G3 the updated drum sights and updated flash suppressor and synthetic furniture. This variation became known as the G3A3. Also, a model with a collapsible stock was produced known as the G3A4. A semi-automatic export model was developed for importation into civilian markets, most notably into the United States of America. They were imported between 1974 and 1989 when an executive order was passed by George Bush Sr. to ban further importation of the rifle. Only 49,000 made it into the country. JLD then began using the tooling and began production on a ban-compliant HK-91 clone in 2002. When the Clinton assault rifle ban ended in 1994, JLD began making other HK clones and configurations we know today. In 2005, JLD was purchased by PTR, which continued manufacturing of what we know today as the PTR-91. Now let's get into the overall specifications of the two rifles, starting up here with the C308. It does have an overall length of 40.25 inches, a barrel length of 18 inches, and an overall weight of 9 pounds. The PTR-91 does have an overall length of 40.5 inches, a barrel length of 18 inches, and an overall weight of 9.5 pounds. Let's go ahead and talk about the barrel and handguard configurations of the two, starting up here with the Century. As we mentioned, it is an 18-inch barrel. It is a chrome moly 4140 steel, and it does have the iconic G3 or HK91 or semi fluted chamber. The PTR-91 also has an 18-inch match-grade H&K profile tapered barrel and also has that fluted chamber. The thread pitching on the C308 is 5/8 by 24, so this can be removed, and you can grab your favorite AR-10 muzzle device and replace that on here if you like. The C308 does use the Century Arms muzzle brake, which is a chevron brake which diverts gases in the upward position, giving a counteracting force pushing the muzzle down. So really good for mitigating recoil and keeping that muzzle flip down to a very, very good, reasonable level. One note of contention about this, however, is some people have argued that it does put off a lot of concussion to any shooter who might be standing to the left or the right of you. Let's be honest, however, this is a military battle rifle, so if you are using this as a prepper rifle, a last line of defense, or anything like that, that sort of thing doesn't really matter. All you really stand to do is annoy the people that you're out at the range with. The PTR-91 does use a 15/1 right-hand thread pitch, which is also consistent with the original thread pitching on a G3 rifle. The flash hider itself is very iconic to what you might liken to an AR-15A2 flash hider, birdcage flash hider. It does have 6 vent holes directing gas in all 6 directions. Also to the rear, you will notice those flats, which can be used to grip onto with your favorite barrel wrench to do an easy transition or change into a different muzzle device if you like. Getting up here into the handguards, these are polymer handguards. Of course, both of these are surplus parts from HK and they're in excellent condition. As these are advertised as brand new rifles, keep in mind there are various surplus parts on them, so both of these are rated as NRA good to excellent condition. So even if you get a brand new PTR Industries PTR-91, you might see little dings or dents in the stocks. It's not anything to get all worried about because those are surplus parts, but they are in excellent condition. Just to give you an idea, you might see little nicks and scratches up here. This is a brand new rifle to us. It is part of our inventory. Those were not put there by us, obviously. It just came on there on the handguard. As it is, the GI configuration, it is in the OD green color. Up here, we do have the standard black. Of course, either one of these, there is a little roll pin up here which can be pushed out. I could even theoretically take the handguards off of each and swap them with one another, or you can get the classic wood style if you like. You can find those parts on Numerate gun parts or Apex gun parts and throw those on yourself as well. Very easy to change out. Also on the aftermarket, there are quad rail systems which you can purchase to replace on there yourself as well. Both of these do have the vent hole ports and they are heat shielded. The front sight base on the C308 is a hooded front sight post. You will notice a little opening here at the top. You can use an adjustment tool, and that is elevation adjustable up at the front. The PTR-91 also uses a hooded front sight, but there is no opening up there on the top, so it is fixed and not adjustable. The charging handle on the C308 is a surplus sent-me part. It is a non-reciprocating charging handle, and it does fold forward to lock during shooting. To unlock, you simply grab and open. That you will see there is then in the open position. From there, you can go ahead and pull to the rear, and you can twist it up into a little notch here to lock the bolt open if you choose to do so. Upon inserting a new magazine, you can simply knock this down, and it'll throw your bolt forward, and again, the charging handle closes to lock itself. The PTR-91 works in the exact same fashion. It does close up here to lock. You can pull it open to engage it, and then pull to the rear to lock it in the open position. And again, upon inserting a new magazine, you can go ahead and slap that down and it slams forward to lock. Now let's go ahead and talk about the receivers. Now, both of these receivers are made by PTR Industries. They are stamped steel, which is rolled and then welded. The overall finishing on the actual PTR guns themselves just seem to be a little bit nicer. So you'll notice there are welds on these creases, which are pretty low profile. They're not too super obvious. The welding up here on the sight base is still pretty nicely done, very well finished and polished off. And of course up here on the bridge of the receiver up here too, just very low key, not too noticeable. Now bringing in the C308, the welds here are a lot more crude. Still a pretty nice seam up here and up here, but just not as nicely finished and polished off. But both receivers are made by PTR Industries. Now the finish here on the C308 is a powder coat, and then here on the PTR-91 is a military style parkerizing. Now some other features which we will get into, it shows a little bit of the better quality and a little bit of what you're really paying more for when you're getting into a PTR. And I'll bring this up for you. Starting off with the C308, we do have the rear sight is the set me pattern, this flip and rotating paddle rear sight, which of course we said was welded in place. Now the first setting is an up close, or what they call point blank set aperture or sight aperture. Of course you can, and this is pretty stiff, it's actually very stiff. You can rotate these to different apertures at 200, 300, and 400 yards. Now on the PTR-91 we do see the updated HK sights that they did put on here in place of those paddle sights that we saw on the set-me rifles. So this is a drum here that does spin and rotate to get to your different dioptic sight settings. So up here, I'll switch this back. You have similar sight pictures. So here you do have that very open, close in point blank sight, I guess you call it. And of course, this drum spins to give you 200, 300, and 400 yards. Now you do have a screw here, so this can be unscrewed and you can remove the sight base. And you can get an HK style claw mount, which will mount onto the top if you do want rail space up here on the top. Now, one of the advantages of the C308 is they did weld on this Picatinny rail here, so it's already ready to go if you want to mount an optic on there. Now, the trigger groups and trigger group housings are also pretty different as well. Here on the Century C308, we do have a polymer, what they call the Navy style trigger group housing. And we do have a selector lever. Now this is a surplus set-me part, of course down for fire and up for safe. If you want to get into the all the way vertical, that's for taking out and removing this safety lever. Also serves as a cross pin, so you put that in the upward position and you can roll this cross pin out, or your safety selector, which then will allow you to pull the trigger group out the top, which I will show you when we get into disassembly. Now on the PTR-91 you do have a metal construction trigger group housing here, and you do have very nice fire selector, and this lever is just, it's a lot nicer, it just feels more refined. And of course up here you have safe, and then here you have your two fire modes, which would be on a fully automatic G3, but of course both of these fire modes work in the semi-automatic function. Also this trigger group housing is not a pistol grip and trigger grip housing all molded as one piece like we saw on the C308. This is actually a separate piece here which can be removed, and you can switch out to a different hand grip now, or a pistol grip. You cannot do that on the C308 without replacing the entire trigger group together, or not the trigger group but the trigger group housing. Now the trigger on the PTR-91 rates in at about 5 to 6.5 pounds. It does have a very nice clean break with a very nice smooth reset right there, and then again into a break. So actually excellent trigger on this. So the trigger group on the C308 is nice, but I will argue it is not as nice as the trigger group on the PTR-91. But it does have a little bit of take up about right there, and then a nice clean break. And then the reset is very smooth, which resets about right there. You just heard it maybe. And then again into a nice break. So actually the reset on this is pretty nice, about as nice as the PTR-91, but the initial take up is a little bit longer on this than on the PTR. But you can go on hkparts.com and actually get matched trigger groups, and I'll show you it's actually very, very easy to replace the trigger group in this. Now the magazine release on the C308 is a button up here, very difficult to get to from your right hand, so you may have to reach around and push it, or if you have long fingers you won't have trouble. But you will definitely have to disengage your grip in most cases to roll your finger up there to hit that button and remove your magazine. Now the PTR works the exact same way, but they did notice that as being a little bit of an inconvenience. So what they did go ahead and do is add a paddle down here, so you can engage it here with your supporting hand as well to rock that magazine out. So that works pretty well too. So here are the buttstocks on both. Like I said, here on the C308 we have the black, and up here on the PTR-91 we have the OD green. Both of these are HK surplus parts. Now you will notice two little holes here. That is to stow away the takedown pins. You can take these out for disassembly, stow away the pins in here, so if you are out in the field it reduces your chance of risking those pins. You have the same thing up here on the PTR-91. Now down here we do have a sling swivel loop here on the stock, and then we also have the exact same thing, of course, here on the PTR-91. Now the PTR-91 does have a plastic butt pad here, and on the C308 it's more of a also kind of a plastic, even sort of a rubberized texture. Now I will get into the disassembly of the C308. You may need a rubber mallet and a punch to assist you in getting those pins out. That might not be necessary on your rifles. This one is brand new from the factory, so it is a little bit tight. I will start off by removing the magazine. Now back here there are two little push pins here. I'm going to go ahead and just tap those out. There we go. With those pins removed, I can go ahead and work free my buttstock. And here is the buttstock and the recoil spring and guide rod. I can set that aside. Now I can, with that pin removed, that front pin also works as a cross pin to hold your trigger group up in place, so now it can freely rotate down and off and out of the way. Then I can grab my charging handle and go ahead and start working my bolt to the rear, and then grab my bolt carrier group. Now here is the bolt carrier group and the piston rod. This is a very beefy and bulky part. This is a surplus SETME part, so it's also nice that that is an original SETME, original SETME part. Now with the trigger group, one thing I had mentioned earlier is if I want to, I can push this safety lever in the up position. That will allow the safety to come out and be removed. And with that being removed, I can go ahead and grab my trigger pack and go ahead and pull it out of the trigger housing. Now that's one reason that these being polymer, it's okay. There's not a lot of stress and wear that is burdened on the trigger group housing, but the trigger group itself is steel in construction here on these parts. And like I said, I just lost a piece off, figure out where that went. But like I said, what you can do is you can purchase a matched trigger group, and just as easily as you saw me take that out, you can replace that and put that in to get you a nicer trigger if you want. And like I said, you can find those on hkparts.com. Now in the trigger group housing itself, there is kind of a steel reinforced bedded piece here for that rearward cross pin, so that you don't have that cross pin resting on a polymer piece, which I guess would be the most important functional part there. Now the PTR-91 is going to come apart the exact same way, but I'll go ahead and quickly do that so you can see some of the differences of the internals, which again are not that different. But we do have these push pins here. Now on this PTR, I don't need to use a punch. They're not that tight. I can just go ahead and push them out. And like I said, on some of those C308s, they could be this easy to remove. It's just the one I had there required a punch. And then I can go ahead and pull this guy off the rear. And again, there's my guide rod and recoil spring. That will allow the trigger group to rotate out of the way. And like we said here, that is kind of that stamped steel trigger group housing and construction, which is a lot beefier and heavier. That's one thing to point out, is this is going to add some weight. Now this is probably, we mentioned the other one was the C308 was about 9 pounds. This rates in at about 9.5, so you can probably account for that extra ½ pound right here in the trigger group. Now with that out, I can go ahead and grab my charging handle and throw this out the rear, and then I have that disassembled. Now as I mentioned, the C308 does use the surplus SETME bolt carrier groups and bolts. Now these are made, now the earlier PTRs were made by HK and they would use some HK surplus parts. Now they're predominantly all made by PTR Industries. There were a lot of earlier complaints and conflicting thoughts on the bolt head used by PTR, that some were out of spec or that they would wear quickly. I don't know if those problems have since been corrected. I imagine that they have, since everybody really unanimously loves the PTR-91s. But that is just a little bit of a difference there. So this is an opportunity to basically say, like, if you're more of a collector and you want the gun to have more original military parts, the C308 does have more of those original surplus parts, which I actually think is pretty cool because I like collecting military arms myself. Now that doesn't mean that it adds a lot of collector value to it, because it is still kind of a conglomeration of HK parts and SETME parts and PTR parts, whereas the PTRs are mainly all made by PTR Industries with some surplus parts used by HK. Now that's all the time I have for you today on these. If you enjoyed that, please let me know by hitting that like button. If you have any questions, please leave those down in the comment section. I will try to get to as many of those as I can. If you enjoyed this and want to see more videos like it, please consider subscribing to our channel. Again, this is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV. We will see you next time.